Hi, everybody. Thanks again for joining us for the Y.E.S. Tonight is our last part of a three-part series with Oak Wealth Advisors. Tonight, we're talking about the continuity of care. I have Mike Walther with us. Mike is a CPA and founder of Oak Wealth Advisors. We have Randy with us as well, too. They're both just gems of people and also a wealth of knowledge. And we're so happy to have you guys here with us tonight. And I'll let you take it away from there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amy, and really thanks to the YMCA and all you do for the community. And we're thrilled to be with some of these families tonight to share what we know. I'm going to go ahead and flip my screen on here, and we'll get right to the presentation. All right, hopefully everybody's seeing my screen now. So this is proof that I've been in the disability community for over 50 years. This is my brother and I last year during the holidays. He's 55 years old now, and his success as an adult is what inspired me to start Oak Wealth Advisors 18 years ago, and really to share with you all tonight some of the things that our family's been successful with and challenged with in helping my brother into adulthood with his disabilities. Easy for me to say, with his disabilities. Hopefully I got that recorded correctly. All right, so by way of background, I mentioned I've been doing this for, over 20 years now, and I've had a brother for 55. So disability has always been part of my life. Disability planning and doing that area of financial services to the public has been our focus at Oak Wealth Advisors for about 20 years. We've been very fortunate, as you can see on the screen, to have won a number of awards recently. I'm not going to read through all those, but we've been recognized for our service to the disability community and the quality of the service we've been providing. My colleague Randy, who Amy mentioned will be over in the chat tonight, she can answer a lot of your questions live during the presentation. And if you come up with something that she thinks I didn't cover correctly, she'll interrupt me, we'll go back and we'll get that addressed. The goal of tonight is to make sure that you come away with something a little bit new to your thinking. Hopefully get a couple of your questions answered if there's something top of mind, and hopefully just come away knowing more about what the opportunities are for our loved ones as adults. And as you can see, Randy also has been very successful in her career as an advocate, as a parent, and really helping the entire community know more about disability options and the challenges in getting all the benefits. So we're both experts in this area. We're looking forward to sharing what we know with you guys tonight. One thing I do want to say is that there's a chance our language tonight will offend some or all of you in one way or another. We know that language can be triggering, especially in the disability community. Some people like saying disability, others like saying special needs, and dislike the other term. I'm going to probably use them both interchangeably. Also, when we're talking in a group setting, we'll typically use person first language, which is an example of the person with a disability, as opposed to saying the disabled person. Now, in some cases, people who have a diagnosis are so proud of it, they like identity first language. And if we're meeting with that person or their family one-on-one, we'll certainly recognize their preference and speak the way they wish us to. But tonight we'll probably be using person first language for most of the presentation. Just wanted to explain to you the differences and how we've chosen to move forward with our presentation with you all tonight. With that, what is it that a firm like ours does? What can you expect if you hired Oak Wealth Advisors or anyone else for that matter to serve as a special needs planner for your family? Well, that would include everything you see on the screen, helping you find and keep public benefits for your loved one, planning for both financially and administratively their future care, creating structure and options so that they can be as independent as possible based on their skills, their strengths, and their needs. Then helping you find additional resources for your family and for your loved one, depending on where they are, what stage of life they're in, and what they might be seeking in the future. And then also protecting them from predators and creditors. It's typically one of the biggest fears our families face is that we want our loved one to have independence, but that comes with risk. We help families weigh those two different things, and that'll be a major focus of tonight's conversation about housing and decision making. And then advising on the structures for transitioning the wealth from potentially grandparents or parents down to that loved one in the most effective way to avoid taxes and keep benefits in place. So those are kinds of things that special needs planners should do for your family. If you think those are valuable things, you want to find someone, reach out, Google it, use your favorite AI tool, find some help if you need it. So we believe in working with families, there's really 8 essential elements of a sound financial plan or a special needs plan for a family. And those are the 8 little green bubbles you see. It starts with public benefits. That's the multi-million-dollar set of governmental benefits that most of our loved ones are eligible for, but are challenging to get and keep. Then there's the 2 main constructs for holding investments or assets for their benefit: able accounts and special needs trusts. Those are all topics covered in other sessions we've done for the YMCA in the past. Tonight's focus is the rest of that oval. Actually, beneficiary designations typically fall underneath special needs trusts and able accounts because that's how you designate who gets the money when someone dies. We're going to start focusing tonight on decision making, vocational challenges, housing opportunities, and the benefits of a care guide. And as you can see in the middle of the screen, communication is absolutely essential. The best planning that gets done can be disrupted by a loving family member outside your immediate family unit who wants to help and makes a gift or sets something up in a way that's going to jeopardize your loved one's benefits, which again is the top of the screen. It's the most important thing we're trying to protect throughout all the planning we're doing. So with that, let's get into the topics for tonight. Decision making. We want you to consider and think about 6 different potential decision making types of people in your loved one's future. Now, again, tonight's session is going to not be as specific in terms of rules, regulations, and best practices. This is more of a let's introduce topics and provide choices, and then each of you with your own family dynamic can figure out which elements that we're talking about tonight are going to be the best fit for you. There are no right or wrong answers. This is one area of the planning that's really more flexible, and in some cases, are going to change multiple times over your loved one's future. Whereas how an able account works, how a special needs trust works, how you apply for benefits, there's very specific rules around those things. Tonight's gonna be a little more flexible, so take that for whatever it's worth, and hopefully think through as I'm discussing these different things, what might make the most sense for your loved one now, and what things would you want to investigate for them for the future. Using that as the guideline, let's look at these different types of decision makers individually. We'll start with the one that's the individual, him or herself. So if the person turns 18, the government is going to define them as an adult. And at that point, whether or not they can care for themselves becomes a really important concept. If they can't make decisions for themselves, they can't care for themselves, they should be eligible for benefits from the government. The government's there to step in if a person can't do for themselves what they should be able to do based on normal development. Now, for most kids, if they go on to college after high school or go on to a trade program, they're going to be able to set themselves up for future work and hopefully future independence. For many of our loved ones, that may not be an option. For some, it's going to be additional education past high school, but it may not lead to a job. That was my brother's case. He finished high school, and at the time, there was no age 22 option to stay in school as there is today for that transition period. He was done at 18. My parents thought, well, maybe some additional college education would help him. So he did some community college work for a while. That kind of just kicked the can down the road for him. It wasn't going to lead to independence. He can make some decisions for himself. He's relatively able, but he needs guidance. He needs prompting. He needs some support, and often looks for, some confirmation on bigger decisions. So for him, while he's still rather independent, I wouldn't say that he's making all the decisions for himself as an individual. And to be honest, most of us seek help. If you have a spouse, you often lean on your spouse for help with answering questions. All of us do that naturally. The question for the purpose of planning for your loved one with a disability is, do you see them as being fully independent and be able to make reasonably good decisions most of the time? There's no way to protect people from making bad decisions. All of us do that all the time, unfortunately. So the reality is we want to figure out what's their skill level and what's the risk of leaving those decisions in their hands when the consequences are theirs, right? There's ways to avoid the consequences, but that requires taking away some of their freedoms. So this is the most free, the most independent choice, is to leave the individual to make their own decisions. Rather straightforward. On the opposite end of the spectrum, from leaving the person to make all their own decisions, is what's called a guardianship. In some states, it's referred to as a conservatorship. So depending on how long you've been in Illinois, you might not be familiar with the term guardian. A guardian or conservator is someone who's going to be taking over the rights or having the rights of the person transferred to them. That guardian who plays that role then has all the decision-making responsibility for the individual. And in fact, the individual loses those rights. So a guardianship is a transfer. It's not an additional decision maker. It's the only decision maker at that point for the individual. That provides the most amount of protection, because when that happens, no matter what the individual does, it can be reversed. There's an ability to go back and say the person did not have capacity. They didn't have the legal standing to make that decision, to enter into that contract, to do whatever it was that they signed up to do. You can just make that null and void as if it never happened. The guardian shows up and says, hey, you know what? You never should allow that person to sign that. They're not able to sign that legally. You can't enforce it against them. So that's the best protection. However, that comes, as I mentioned, with the loss of rights. In Illinois, we're a little fortunate. In Illinois, guardianship can be narrowly specified to cover certain things and not others. In some states, if you were to move and you have to transfer your guardianship to the new state, that state's legislation may not allow for limited guardianship. It may require either a plenary or full guardianship, as it's known. Plenary is a legal term, or no guardianship at all. So you got to decide, do I want to transfer all the rights, or do I leave the person with more individual decision making, which could be detrimental? The challenge with the guardianship is that it requires a judge to make
Meeting
this
is being
determination.
recorded. That's good.
Sorry, if we can stay on mute, it'll make it easier for everybody to hear. Thank you. So a judge has to make the appointment. It goes through a court hearing process, either in person or via Zoom. That's one of the things that changed during COVID, is we now do these guardianship hearings over Zoom, where the judge is going to ask questions of the individual. And so for most of us, we're helping our loved one have the best expectations for their future. We're building up their confidence. We're letting them know how much we love them and care for them and how highly we think of them. Well, during the guardianship process, the judge is going to ask the person if they're able to do things, if they want to keep the ability to make decisions. We need to be coaching our loved one that, hey, during this process, you want to let the judge know that you have difficulty with some of these decisions, or you often need help making good decisions, or you get confused easily, things like that. In those cases, the judge will likely allow one of the parents to be the guardian. That's typically what the petition is. A petition is a legal request of the judge. Now, what can happen, and it's rare, if the parents don't do a good job during that guardianship hearing, if the judge doesn't trust the parents' judgment, if they show up disheveled, maybe they had a late night the night before, they don't look great, they're not answering well, the judge can decide the individual needs a guardian and choose a guardian appointed by the court, not one of the parents or one of the siblings or someone else who is logically related to the person who would be a good guardian choice. They'll appoint what's called a guardian ad litem, meaning someone that's going to be in the Cook County court system or Lake County, wherever you're located, in that system that's going to be in charge of maybe 200 people. Well, how likely do you think they're going to be at knowing your loved one really well, able to make the best decisions for your son or daughter? I don't think that's a great situation. So we want to make sure that when we go through the guardianship process, we understand the risks, that a judge making a determination is going to decide your loved one's decision-making future. And we want to make sure it doesn't disrupt the individual's relationship with his or her parents. Because again, we need to talk about limits, disabilities, and challenges during a guardianship hearing. And we typically want to maybe shy away from emphasizing those things and focus more on their strengths and their abilities and their future, and keep a more positive outlook in other times. A guardianship also is not cheap. In most cases, we recommend that a family hire an attorney to help with that probate process that goes to the probate court. There's different types of attorneys. Those who practice in the probate area know how this works. They can advise the family. They can provide some of that coaching before the guardianship hearing, and typically those go through more smoothly. You can do it by yourself without hiring an attorney. You just pay the court fees, you get assigned a court hearing, and you go do it. The risks are what I laid out earlier. It may not go the way you want it to. I think paying, hundreds of dollars, maybe a few $1,000s to get an attorney to help you through it can be a really valuable expense in the long-term view of your son or daughter's future. So give that some thought. It's not free, but if your loved one's going to need those kinds of supports for their safety and security going forward, get the guardianship in place whenever you're ready. can be as soon as age 18 or any time thereafter in their adult life. Any questions about guardianship?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. There's something that's in between a guardianship, conservatorship, or letting the person decide things on their own. And that's what's called a power of attorney. Many of you, if you've done your estate planning and have simple wills or simple trusts, you probably also did powers of attorney. If you're married, you typically name your spouse. If you're not married, you might maybe named a sibling or another relative to have power of attorney. What that means is that you're given someone else who's known as your agent the ability to make decisions in the event you can't make them for yourself. The typical example is you're injured in an accident, you go to the hospital, and the medical team's got to make some life altering decisions. Well, it'd be great if a family member who knows your wishes could step in and provide that medical team with the answers that they need to move forward, whether it's going to be putting you on a ventilator or not, whether it's going to be an amputation or not. If that person can help with that decision making, you'll get your wishes delivered the way you want. In addition, back before we got to everything being electronic on Zoom and digital signatures, if people were traveling for work but needed to sign a legal document on short notice, their agent could sign for them if they have a power of attorney for property. That provides them the rights to sign as if they're the person on any legal document. Now, with all the digital signatures and all the Zoom work we're doing, there's a little less need for a power of attorney for property. But the power of attorney for healthcare is super important because of those types of situations I just mentioned, where someone may need medical care and can't answer for themselves what they want. In addition, when working with our loved ones who might be younger, maybe they don't have a medical crisis, but rather they want someone to go with them to the doctor's office to help them understand the medical care they're getting, the recommendations from the medical professionals as to what they should have done going forward. Maybe it's a procedure, maybe it's new medicine, maybe it's actually getting a treatment. Well, it's nice that that person can then get the medical records and see why that recommendation is being done. Like, why is it that he needs to do this? Why is it that she needs to take those medicines? Well, under HIPAA, the medical professionals can't give someone else your loved one's medical records. But with a power of attorney for healthcare, they can. Because then it says, please allow my loved one to see all my information and help me make a decision. And in fact, the agent can make a decision for the person. But different than a guardianship, while an agent under a power of attorney can make a decision, sign a document, basically do things that are basically legal type actions, the individual never gives up their own rights. Understand that major difference. With a power of attorney, the individual retains their rights and grants someone else essentially equivalent rights, but they never give it up. So let's say we get to the doctor's office. I'm there with my son. He has a disability. The doctor tells my son, you know what? We can give you this shot. Your arm's going to be numb and sore for a week, but you're guaranteed to never get this awful disease. I'm thinking, gosh, that'd be great. We can avoid that disease for the rest of his life. He's got to suffer with a little bit of pain for a week. That's a great trade-off. My son hears, your arm's going to really hurt for a week. He says, I don't want it. I, as the agent, can't force him to get that medical treatment. His rights trump that of the agent. But hopefully the agent can work with them and the medical professionals to explain to the individual, my son in this case, that it's really beneficial to get the shot. But again, understand, under a guardianship, he's getting the shot, period. Because the guardian's going to say that's what's best for them, do it. The individual can't fight that. Under an agent under a power of attorney, think of it as a kind of a 49-51 relationship. The individual keeps the 51%. They've got the authority to make the decision. If they choose not to make a decision, maybe they're not communicating at all, the agent can make the decision for them. Hopefully that makes sense. Powers of attorney are not granted by judges. They're simple legal documents. You need to have a witness when you sign them so that there's some proof that you weren't just signing yourself up to be their loved one's agent without their authority. Somebody sees you and the individual sign it, This does require the individual to have capacity to know that they're giving someone these rights. So in some cases, that can be a challenge. But this is kind of a good start for most people because it gives a lot of rights to someone else to see and help with decision making. And if your loved one's living in your house with you, there's probably some security there that major decisions could be discussed and the whole family would see them before they have to be made. A guardianship provides greater protection. Okay, this provides a little more freedom for assistance. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. The next one. This is a newer and more narrow type of a power of attorney. Supported decision making is a relatively new type of document you can pull down from each state's website. Each state has a slightly different version of the document. Illinois has their own. Not all states have this yet. In just a moment, I'll show you a slide of the country that shows which states have it, which ones don't, which ones are in process for allowing supported decision making. To the best of my knowledge, you've not had a single client actually implement this and use it. It's effectively a no-cost version of a power of attorney. The power of attorney you're typically going to get from an attorney doing your estate plan, so there's going to be some fee for that. Supported decision making you can download from the state's website. It does require witnesses, as does the power of attorney, but there's no cost to pulling it off the website. So think of it as kind of a free power of attorney, if you will. It's typically for more narrow purposes, like a one-time decision on a specific topic. But it could be used in a very similar fashion as a power of attorney. We're going to name a supporter, who's effectively the agent under a power of attorney. The supporter is the person who makes the decision-making supports for the individual. Not going to make the decision in lieu of the person, but can be given all the information, like from a medical professional or on a contract, about the background information to be able to help the individual make the best decision possible. Again, kind of having someone sitting second chair when a big decision has to be made and be allowed access to all the information, but all they're going to do is tell the person what to do. The person still has to make the ultimate decision for themselves. So this is going to be for someone who's higher functioning and just wants some help on certain things and could name different people in different capacities. You could have multiple supported decision-making documents in place so the individual can get help from different people for different things. Again, haven't got a lot of personal examples to share with this being used. Very new, but the idea here is to give our loved ones who've got the capacity to make decisions a little more flexibility and support in their decision-making options. Okay, so with
Mike,
that-
excuse me, I just put in the chat box, if anybody's interested in learning more about supported decision-making, you can go to the Illinois Guardianship and Advocacy Commission, and the link is there. So they've got a nice set of resources and are happy to assist in any way.
Thanks for putting it in there, Randy. Yep. There's more information there. Again, if you all end up using supported decision-making and you find it to be really useful, please email Randy and me. We'd love to hear your story. We'll be able to share that on a no-name basis with other families. We want to see people use this effectively. We just don't have the personal examples yet because it's so new. And at the end of the presentation, you'll have all of our contact information and an ability to be added to our monthly newsletter. We put lots of new information out and update people on new laws and new opportunities for families. That's our shameless plug. Here's a view of the country right now and where we are with supported decision making. You can see Illinois is in that big green band. It's the majority of the country, but it's certainly not all of it. There's a lot of the country that's still red. Those are folks that are not implementing supported decision making in any capacity right now. And you've got 3 states that are yellow. They're in the process of getting it in place. So I think by 2026, we'll probably be around 30 states, maybe 35 that have it. It's a great idea. I just don't know that's going to be that useful. I love the idea of giving our loved ones more opportunities and more flexibility for getting help. All right, so a trustee. A lot of times families will come to see us for their planning, and they think if they name a trustee, that person's going to be able to help their loved one make all their decisions. That's not accurate. The trustee's decision making is very narrow. The trustee is someone who is effectively in charge of the accounts that are in the name of the trust. So if I have a special needs trust for my son, the trustee makes a decision on how to invest that money, filing the tax returns, filing any state required paperwork for their benefits. and basically staying in touch with my son, who's the beneficiary of the trust, one who benefits from the assets. That's the beneficiary. Communicating with him about what his needs are, what does he need to have paid, what does he want, and the trustee has to make those decisions. So it's someone who makes decisions around what the resources are in the trust. Typically, it's going to be financial assets, so investment accounts, savings accounts, maybe a money market or cash savings account. It could also be the house. The house can be owned by a trust, and the trustee is responsible for paying all the bills related to the house. It could be a mortgage. It could just be paying, for the maintenance and upkeep. So groundskeeping, maybe someone's coming in to clean the house. The trustee's got responsibility for keeping the house up and keeping the value of the asset, the house, well maintained. But that's it. Those are the only decisions the trustee is to make. They don't get to decide healthcare decisions. They don't get to decide or make a decision for the individual on voting. They don't get to decide anything else in their life. Solely what's in the account, in the trust account, is what they have authority over. So again, you want a trustee who's good administratively, understands finances, and can communicate well. But they're not going to be making all those life decisions that we need either a guardian, someone under a power of attorney, or a supporter under supported decision making to make with or for the benefit of your loved one. Okay, so again, understand a trustee role is limited, even though they're a very important person in figuring out the future planning for your loved one. They're not going to be the sole solution for making all decisions. Okay, the last type of person who can help with decision making is the one who has no legal standing. The caregiving person or agency may in fact be, of all these different people we just talked about, the one who's going to spend the most time with your loved one in the future. The irony there is they don't have the legal right to make any decisions for your loved one. Not with them, not on behalf of them. They just have no legal rights. Their job is to do their duty, whatever that specified duty is. Typically, it's going to be helping them get ready, do activities of living, making sure they're eating, personal grooming, maybe doing some light cleaning. But their job is to keep the person safe and get them through the day. Maybe there's healthcare involved with that. Maybe it's going to be a licensed nurse who's playing that role of caregiver in some cases. They don't have any legal rights for decision making, yet they're going to spend so much time with your loved one. Important if that caregiver is the only person involved with your loved one, because maybe you, your spouse, there's no other relatives, everyone's passed away. You want the caregiver to have a good line of communication with the trustee. If the assets for the benefit of your loved one, things that will provide the financial support for them in the future, we want the trustee to know what that person needs. If they can't communicate, maybe the caregiver becomes kind of that communication support, but they can't make the decisions. Very important distinction there. They can be there for information purposes. They're going to be loving and supporting, hopefully, your loved one's needs, but they can't make decisions. They don't have any legal appropriate standing. Okay. Any questions about the different kinds of decision making?
Nope, we're good.
Okay. Really important to keep those things separated and figure out what might be the best solution for your loved one when they reach adulthood. And then you can always pivot. Guardianships can be reversed, probably the hardest of all these things to change because it requires a judge to reverse him or herself and remove a guardianship once it's been put in place. The other ones are easier. You can terminate a power of attorney because the individual can terminate it or the person can resign from the role. Similar for the supported decision making. Okay, let's pivot over to the vocational things. This one's a really tough topic. As some of you may know, the government, when they're looking at someone's eligibility for public benefits, is looking at two major factors, one of which is the obvious one. Does the person have a significant enough disability to qualify? And they've got lots and lots of regulations, and even have their own medical professionals in some cases that are brought in to review the person's case to see, is this a significant medical, intellectual, developmental disability that will prohibit someone from what? Being able to earn a living. So this vocational piece is the other half of that. If our loved one's skills, regardless of their disability challenges, are sufficient enough that the government says, you know what, you can earn your own living. What is that number? It's around $15,000 a year. If our loved ones can make $15,000 a year, regardless of what their diagnosis is, the government views them as not being disabled for purposes of benefits. Might still be disabled. That's more of a medical determination. But medically disabled for purposes of benefits requires them not be able to work at a substantial gainful activity level. So, if we're thinking about vocational things in employment, if our loved ones can be really challenged and can only do a job with lots of supports and can't get to work, they need to have someone with them 24/7. You need to take into consideration if they're making $1,000 a month, what were the costs that had to be incurred to earn that $1,000? Was there a support worker there? How did the transportation work? Could they actually ride public transit at a low cost? Or did it require a special kind of van to be picking them up and dropping them back off? So those things can reduce the countable amount of earnings every month from what's on the paycheck to what the true number is that gets reported to the government. You can reduce that. So what we don't want to do is have our loved one not really working on their own. Maybe it's a generous relative or a friend of the family who puts them on the payroll and gives them $20,000 a year when they're not really earning it. That's great for the 20 grand they get, but it's going to disqualify them from benefits. And that's a huge loss. So that trade-off has to be understood. If our loved one's got a decent skill set and an employer that they love working with and understands them and their unique challenges and support needs, fantastic. Let's do that. Let's get them employed. Let's have them get all the other benefits. Because if you think about it, the benefit to having our loved ones work is far more than the number on a paycheck. It's that community. It's that sense of belonging. It's a sense of purpose, someplace to go, 3, 4, 5 days, maybe 7 days a week in some cases, to a group they can be with, and they build friendships. There's an enormous amount of value to that, well beyond the number on a paycheck. But there's that trade-off potentially. In my own brother's case, my parents weren't able to get him any of those means-tested benefits we've talked about in other sessions. So the question was, well, okay, how much can he make? Well, he's still making slightly more than minimum wage 25 years into his job. He's gotten some raises and he's very proud of those. We don't bother to point out to him he's gotten the raise because the minimum wage has been raised. But you know what? He loves his job. We're proud of him. He's proud of himself. He's gotten, awards and promotions and all the rest. So he feels really good about it. Tons of value to that. And that's what we want for all of our loved ones. The reality is, somewhere between 80 and 90% of our loved ones who want to work, who could work, are not employed. Tonight's not my night to get on a stool and just scream about that, but I'm working with lots of different agencies that are trying to create that conduit between an employer who gets it and understands there's some people out there with some neat skills who want to work, and that group of people who have those skills who want to work, where there's a disconnect. Interviewing doesn't go well. People don't know where to find each other. The training isn't great for the managers, the companies who want to try to do it. So there's this friction between the two groups that if we can remove that, I think we can improve the employment outcomes by a lot. But we're still probably 5 to 10 years away from that being more of a reality nationally. But it is happening. I want to give you guys the comfort that lots of people are working on that. And I think there'll be a much higher level of employment amongst our disability community a decade from now. And it's families like yours who are taking in sessions like tonight's and other ones, learning more about the opportunities, finding out about the organizations that are doing that training, and then really taking advantage of what's available in your local community. A number of the groups I'm working with are national. They're not necessarily in Illinois. Illinois has some of those. And certainly as part of your waiver, if you've got a Medicaid waiver, vocational supports can be part of that. So you get it during transition, those years of 18 to 22 in high school. Medicaid waiver programs in Illinois can also continue to support vocational help. So we want to look at what our loved ones need, but we think at Oak Wealth Advisors, the focus should be on your son or daughter's strengths, abilities, and interests. Because if we find something they're interested in doing, they're more likely to work harder at it, be passionate about it, and actually be good at it over time. It may take a little longer than someone else. That's fine. But if they're focused on it and they love it, maybe it can be a lifetime opportunity. For my brother, he loves his job. He's a librarian. To me, that'd be the most boring thing in the world. But for him, he loves it. He loves memorizing numbers and locations. He knows the Dewey Decimal System, which I never figured out as far as like where those numbers go in all the backs of the books and different parts of the library. He knows that stuff like the back of his hand, and he loves doing it. Great, good fit for him. May not be the right fit for your loved one, but looking at your loved one's skills and their needs, what are the supports? My brother needs a quiet environment. That might not be what your loved one needs. So look at those things, work with people who are experts in this area, and don't give up. Right? My brother's out of high school at 18. He didn't get his permanent job he's had for 20 plus years until he's almost 30. That was a long run. We can do better than that today. It shouldn't take us 10 years, although it might, try to get that right employment opportunity.
Two things, Mike, if I can interrupt. One, the registrants probably already know that North Suburban YMCA has a wonderful program and partnership, and they provide a Cafe Voca, which is the coffee cart. And that's up and running and has been up and running, and it provides individuals with disabilities in the transition program and in high school the opportunity to participate. And I believe it's either a 10 or 12-week paid opportunity. So when you think about opportunities, don't not think about organizations like the YMCA, who they provide this, but you never know what that could lead to. It's all about your web of connectedness, and that's one thing that Mike and I always talk about. It's when you meet one person, what can that other person do for you, or who can they connect you with? So create opportunities by communicating with your community, with your network. The second thing I have is a question, and it's what happens, Mike, if a disabled individual has a job earning about $30,000 a year, but is unable to sustain the consistent employment?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. We love it when our loved ones can make a $30,000 a year income. And so if they do that for a year or several years, they'll have quarters of earnings, right? Like all of us do. For full Social Security, the government's going to looking at 40 quarters or 10 years of earnings as a minimum. They'll look at your entire work history and base your Social Security benefit off that. For our loved ones, if they start working at 18 and they work for a couple of years and they lose their job, let's say at 21 or 22, but they've already worked for 3 of the first 6 years between 18 and 24, if the math is right there, they actually qualify for full benefits based on 3 out of 6 years if they do it from 18 to 24. So the amount of quarters or years you need to work is fewer if you start them right away. It grows out to be the full 10 years or 40 quarters once you get out into your 30s. But if you work for multiple years at 30 grand a year, you've basically shown the government in their eyes that your loved one can work and take care of themselves financially. So the Medicaid and SSI opportunities are probably going to be slim or none. SSI, almost guaranteed you're not going to be able to get that at that point. You can probably get SSDI, which is Social Security Disability Insurance. That's going to be the income payment that any of us can get if we're unable to keep working and we've been working in the past. So we basically start our Social Security benefits earlier at a somewhat lower rate. We can get them at whatever age, 30, 40, 50 years old, not 65, 70 years old. So if we're working, we lose the ability to keep working, we can get SSDI, but maybe not SSI that we might have had before if we never worked, which is supplemental security income for those who are poor and unable to work. Medicaid, it depends on what happens. Medicaid may or may not be a lost opportunity depending on how long you worked and what level. But again, once you've got the SSDI in place, you'll eventually get to pick up Medicare as your health care. Now, there's some differences between Medicare and Medicaid. That's not really tonight's topic, but Medicare is going to give you probably better access to doctors and medical care. Medicaid is going to give you long-term care. So if you need to be in assisted living when you're older, Medicaid will pay for that, Medicare will not. So ideally, as our loved ones age, with good planning, if we don't have a situation like the example you're asking about where they've worked for multiple years at $30,000, we can probably help them get both Medicaid and Medicare. And the question is, what's the income stream going to be? Is it going to be from SSDI or SSI? I'm less concerned about that. The medical supports are important, and Medicaid comes with the waiver programs. Medicare does not have waiver programs. So it really all kind of depends, and it's impossible to say like how many months they do it, exactly how much work was it, Were there supports at work to get to the $30,000? Were they doing it solely on their own? Could they get their transportation wise for free? Lots of factors play into it. It's always on a case-by-case basis. But the important thing there is to understand that if we can get our loved ones to work, even if we lose the income benefit from SSI, there are so many valuable things they get in addition to a paycheck from working that's really worth considering. And again, it's a case-by-case situation. Let me move on from vocational things to where they're going to live. This one also causes some consternation. If I told you that 80 to 90% of our loved ones end up living in their parents' household for the majority, if not all of their life, would you be surprised? No, because chances are the people I'm talking to, that's probably your situation. That's what the stats tell us. The vast majority of families have their loved one living at home for the long term. Many of our loved ones, if asked and able to answer, would say, I'd rather live with my friends or by myself or not with my mom and dad anymore. But in some cases, it's a financial consideration where it's going to just be cheaper to live all together. Maybe it's a security and support thing where they need the help and mom and dad are going to provide that help and support and oversight and they need it. That might be the reason why they're living at home. In some cases, to be perfectly honest, it might be the parent's fear, right? And that's real. Every parent's got the concern of, well, if they're not living under my roof, how can I guarantee their safety and security and their decision making? Well, you can't. So something to consider. There are more and more neat housing opportunities coming online. When my son first became an adult in St. Louis, Missouri, there was basically nothing. It was awful institutional type things that, there's been lots of advocacy around to get rid of, where people are being householded, right? Not household, I'm sorry, warehoused. Where basically, okay, you got a room, there's a couple meals a day, there's a TV on, and there's nobody helping you do anything. Just a disaster. Not what we want for any of our loved ones. Then there's a huge push to get rid of all those. The problem is, where do you put those people? Maybe their family's gone. Where do they go? Well, ideally, we want housing that's appropriate and desired by the individual. So families can help with that. And I think a wonderful organization to learn about, if you don't know of them yet, is a group called Together for Choice. What they do is they advocate for everybody's individual rights to live in the type of community they want to be in. Is that, in a house by themselves? Is it with a couple of roommates? Is it in a housing complex with lots of other folks with different challenges with some oversight from a care agency? Is it staying at home with their parents? That's a perfectly reasonable solution too. But there's considerations that go around with housing. One of which is who's going to own where they're living, if it's a condo or a house. Does the individual own it outright? In most cases, that's probably the wrong answer. Legally, it's okay. It's not going to affect their benefits. You can own a house and still get public benefits. Problem is, as you all know, if you own a house or you own a condo of any type, there's all kinds of maintenance and requirements and just things you've got to know about and do administratively to keep the house going. If you're renting, a lot of those things go away with a phone call to your landlord, like, hey, this needs to be fixed. You don't have to hire the person to fix it. You don't have to pay the person to fix it. It's part of your rent. So renting may be easier than owning. In addition, if you're working, can you find housing that's reasonably close to where your employment opportunity is? That's another huge problem in the disability communities, connecting housing with employment opportunities. So in some cases, the new housing that's coming online for our loved ones is going to be in more urban areas where there's more employment opportunities. There's more ability to access those from public transportation or just walking. So that's something we're seeing more and more of around the country, is connecting the housing and the vocational things. Then what kind of support's needed? Can they live totally independently in housing? Most people can't. Most people without a disability don't do a really good job of that when they're younger. So finding the right housing support group, if it's not going to be the parents providing the oversight, who could do that? And we'd suggest that before a parent passes away, they should have the names of at least 2 groups that could provide housing supports for their loved one when they're gone, right? You can do some of that from web searching. You can reach out to organizations like ours or others who know the information and can share resources and ideas and create the network for your family that you need to support your loved one. And then there's the cost, right? It's not cheap. Whether you're renting or there's a house that's owned, the cost is not insignificant. In many cases, our loved ones who've got Medicaid waivers, that comes with some supports for living in a house. Someone can come to the house, provide help. That's part of the package. There's also something known as Section 8 housing. Section 8 housing is often limited, maybe not always in the areas you want your loved one to live in. And if you get the housing Section 8 voucher, which is pretty limited, not everybody wants one, gets one, it allows you to basically get your rent at a subsidized rate from what others are paying in the same building. So it's kind of a housing benefit the federal government provides, but again, not easily accessible and not always something you're going to want once you get the voucher. Having the voucher doesn't guarantee you a location. Okay, so it's important for each family to think about what are the options for our loved one versus living at home. Obviously, most people are still with the living at home option. There are more and more good options coming online. I mentioned Together for Choice as a place to get information about kind of the newest and best practices around the country. Around Illinois, where I'm assuming most of you are tuning in from, there are 4 wonderful organizations. If you don't know them, at least jot these down and think about them. Misericordia, Misericordia, is in Chicago. They've got both high-rise housing and what are called SILAs. Those are going to be smaller group homes of anywhere from 2 to 8 people living together as roommates. Clearbrook, mostly SILA type options with support there as well. That's out of Arlington Heights. Then there's the Center for Independent Futures out of Evanston. They don't actually do the housing, but they do a lot of guiding and support of families and figuring out what kind of housing might be most appropriate and where to source that. And then Keshet, which is headquartered in Northbrook and has offices around Illinois. They also do a lot of housing support and have different locations. So think about using an organization to help you find the right housing fit for your loved one and really understanding what all your options are. Depending on where you are, what your budget is, there's going to be different options available to you. But there's more and more new things coming. And that's where being involved with these organizations and even other organizations on a national level, like Together for Choice, will help you be aware of, okay, my kid's in his 20s now or his 30s now. I want to be thinking about in 20 years what the option might be. I'm fine with them living with me for a while longer, but I know when I'm gone, I need a solution. So having that kind of information and looking for the opportunities that are coming is really important. Questions around that, Randy?
No, we're set.
Okay. So one of the things we often come across with our clients is, gosh, what if we get all this great planning done? We've listened to all these different presentations, we've gotten lots of information. How do we avoid losing the benefits we got? Well, one of the benefits that people get from the federal government is an income benefit, either SSI or SSDI. Well, typically SSI is the first one we're going to apply for when the person's 18. That's about $967 of income that's supposed to cover their housing costs. Now, everybody knows that number is a joke, that it's very hard to find a rental contract in a place you want your loved one to live for under $1,000 a month. And certainly in some parts of the country, it's virtually impossible to find anything for $1,000 a month, even if it's nasty. So if the housing is provided to your loved one, let's say they live at home with mom and dad, the government's going to say, well, hey, if mom and dad are going to provide free housing for this individual, we're going to cut their SSI benefit by 1/3. Because why are we paying for housing if the parents can provide it for free? We can use those resources somewhere else. So what we recommend is that no matter where your loved one's living, if they're paying rent to a third party, if they're living at home, I don't care. Get a rental contract. The rental contract basis is going to state your loved one is going to pay rent for living wherever it is they're living. If it's traditional lease or mortgage type thing, obviously there's a contract there. But in many cases, it's living at home. Why would I have a rental contract for my own kid to live in my house? Well, remember, when your loved one applied for benefits, they were a household of 1. That's how you got the benefits. Because if it was a household of 3 or 4, all of a sudden everybody's income and everybody's assets count. Well, if it's a household of 1 and they're paying you rent of at least 1/3 of the SSI benefit, say $400 to be safe, if the rental contract says they're going to pay you $400 a month in rent, then they get their full check. The full $967 keeps coming. The parents have to take the rent, the $400 a month, report that as income, but they can offset the rental income with the expense of providing the housing, right? They've probably got their own mortgage. They've probably got utility bills, there's maintenance on the house. If they share that equally among those living there, chances are the net impact of having rental income to the parents is zero. Maybe it's even negative. But we want to have a rental contract so we don't lose that 1/3 of the benefit from the government. Okay, so keep in mind, if our loved one's getting an SSI check and is going to be living for free, either because the parents are paying the rent somewhere or they're living at home with the parents, get a rental contract, keep the full benefit. Second one, let's say that our loved one has done all the good planning, you guys have things set up. Maybe you don't have the trust in place yet, the special needs trust, and they get a windfall. A $30,000 inheritance comes in, lands in their name. You're like, uh-oh, I know I can only have $2,000 in my loved one's name, and they just got a $30,000 inheritance. What do I do? Well, go out and buy them a new iPad, buy something they've been waiting for, let them take a trip. Problem is, if that $30,000 isn't gone by the end of the month, the government's going to cut off the SSI check because there's a $2,000 asset limit to keep that coming. So what do? There's two types of contracts that you can draft. Very simple. You can find them online or work with an attorney to get these. One's what's called an in-kind support and maintenance, or ISM. That's in-kind support and maintenance contract. Concept there is, let's assume that mom and dad are basically providing food for their loved one. Well, we could have the child say, for the next 5 years, I'm going to give you $30,000 now, and you're going to provide all my food for the next 5 years. Fine, that's a valid contract. It's a contract for providing something that the individual needs. Great, done. We're going to prepay for 5 years of food. $30,000 goes from the kid to mom and dad, show the government the contract, money's out of their name by the end of the month, they keep all their benefits. The other one's similar, a prepayment contract. Let's say that they're going to be renting somewhere. You have the rent thing figured out, but now you got $30,000 in their name. Let's go prepay rent for 2 years. I can't think of a single landlord that wouldn't be happy to accept the prepaid rent for 2 years. Of course they take the money up front. Who wouldn't? That's a good deal for them. So the idea of prepaying something, whether it's a contract with the family to avoid the deductions from the in-kind support and maintenance deduction you lose if you get certain benefits paid for, or prepaying a third party for a contract you may already have in place, just pay it all off and get that money out of their name. So those are two good little tools to use to make sure we don't lose benefits. Because too often we work hard with our families to help them get those benefits, the SSI and Medicaid in place, and then something unexpected happens and they start losing either a third because there's no rental contract, or they lose everything because they've gone over the asset limit of $2,000 at the end of the month. Okay, so those are two little extra helpful benefits there at the end. Last thing I want to talk about, I should have more time for this, is the care guide. This is a document that can be done any different way you want to, but it's essentially the idea of when we're gone, mother, father, caregiver, whoever it might be, what does the rest of the world need to know to care for our loved one as close to how we were caring for them before we passed as possible? So in the past, these used to be really long documents. You'd fill in the blanks, try to answer 1,000 questions, and nobody ever did it. It was too cumbersome. So Oak Wealth Advisors created one that was basically an outline template of these are the most important topics. Get something down here in writing, do it digitally or write it out. We don't care. Just answer these topics. What's important about your loved one you want someone else to know? More free form. People still weren't doing that very well. Well, fast forward to now. Everything is digital. People are saving things digitally. Nobody has, photo albums. They have everything on their phone. All their photos are digital. Same thing here. There are 3 electronic tools we'll point you to online. One's called Vest Life, another's called Danny Plan, another one's called Ella Plan. They're all very similar in concept. They will prompt you as the family to enter information on different topics about your loved one. It can be updated. You can put passwords on different sections. You can share it with different people as you choose, or protect it and hide it from people if you don't want them to see it. You can have your loved one participate in the process. You can upload videos of them doing something correctly, or maybe a behavior you're trying to avoid, so the future caregiver knows what to look for. It's really, really hard for parents to do this. We joke that it takes 3 things to be successful in completing your care guide: tissues, wine, and chocolate. super emotional, whatever you need for your emotional support, get it in place and do it. A lot of families never get this done, and it'll be their biggest regret when they're in their grave. It's the most valuable thing you can leave, because what you really want to do is protect your loved one forever. This is your best opportunity to do that. And what kinds of things go into it? Here's a brief outline that we would share with families. You can go more in depth on certain things if it's more valuable to your family, but medical information, relationships, both good and bad. Our loved one doesn't like being around this relative. This relative really annoys them. Let's try to avoid those interactions. Abilities and challenges. It's kind of fun here to kind of track. What we found is a lot of times our loved ones continue to improve their abilities even later in life. So document what's changed, what their new abilities are, what new challenges have come in. What are the routines? That's really hard. Nobody's going to find that information somewhere. Medical information, hopefully there's in the medical records. Financial information, hopefully your trustee is going to have that. But what's their daily routine look like? When are they supposed to do different things? Is there a certain order in which they do certain things? That kind of stuff that's in a parent's head or a caregiver's head needs to be documented. If there's things that are meaningful to your loved one that might be religious or family traditions, document them. Who do they do them with? Where do they go for those events? That kind of information can be documented. And again, utilize your loved one's abilities to share what they want as much as possible in this process. But this care guide, again, do it however you want, but get it done and then let people know about it. Remember, communications in the middle of our big oval talking about all this planning? Tell the people who provide future care, whether it's as an agent under a power of attorney, whether it's going to be a trustee, whether it's going to be a caregiver. Let them know this document exists. Start sharing it with them now while you're alive. Ask them about their interest in playing different roles you might have in mind for them. Because if they're going to say, no, I don't want to do that in the future, I don't have the time or the ability to do that, find out now. Then you can find someone else to do it. If you find out, only after you're dead they don't want to do it, how are you going to make a change? You can't. So again, difficult conversations to have, good information to be sharing, do it while you can. And with that, I will tell you that if you'd rather get this kind of information in small little snippets than the hour we just spent together, you can go to our YouTube channel, Oak Wealth Advisors. There's lots of videos there. All those videos are also on our website, which is simply oakwealth.com. We also have a Special Needs Voice podcast on Spotify. We've got about 30 plus episodes there where there's all kinds of leaders in the disability community talking about all the great breakthroughs that are happening. So I'll give you some inspiration about, hey, you know what? The future might be okay. But check that out and see if you like it. Let us know if you do. With that, I should tell you that I may have made everything up tonight. I didn't mean to. None of this was directed at you as our client, because you're not our client as far as I know. Therefore, if you move forward and take action based on what I just said and it doesn't work out, you should blame Randy, not me. No, don't blame either one of us, but hopefully this was helpful and you can make better decisions as a result of being with us tonight. And if you need more help, we are serious about this part. Reach out to us. Reach out to Randy or me. That's our address, our phone number, our emails. And if you use your phone on that QR code there in the green box that says OWA presentation sign in, which is probably really small on your screen. If you're on your phone, you can't possibly read that. But if you take a picture of that, you can get added to our mailing list, which is a monthly newsletter and potentially updates even more frequently than that if something really big that happens. We try to educate the disability community about opportunities. It's not a sales pitch. We're never asking for your business. If we can help educate you, we're thrilled. If you want to work with us or someone else, that's great too. But we want to help make the best decisions for as many families as we can by sharing information. And with that, I'll get back to Amy. And thanks so much for having us. And thanks for being on our Zoom tonight.
Thank you so much. Wow, as always, a plethora of such great information and really important and valuable. I learned a lot. I have taken lots of notes. I'll condense them and send them out as well once we have this recording up on our YouTube, and I'll send everyone the link. And again, I would really highly suggest everybody to sign up for their newsletter. If you found this to be informative, I'm sure you'll find their newsletter to be as much so as well.
Sorry, Amy, I apologize. There was one
Go ahead.
question that came in. At what age should all of this planning start? And that's a really great question. It really depends on your family, the dynamics, what's happening with you, with your loved one's skill sets, strengths, what's happening in school. For sure, around transition planning and a little bit before then, you should begin networking with your community, looking at agencies like the Northbrook YMCA, looking at Clearbrook, making visits to these organizations, beginning to create your own network, looking at your PTOs, your PTAs, the special needs parents associations within the elementary schools or the transition years, that sort of thing. There's a lot of resources within this community that can be tapped into. So if you're not sure where to start, give me a call, shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to kind of begin to walk you through it. And sooner rather than later, certainly not at the age of 18. That's what we don't want, because there's so much going on around that critical time that it could become very cumbersome, and it will stress you out. Truly, it'll stress you out and it'll make things a little bit more complicated. So sooner than that. I hope that helps.
Thank you. And they said thank you as well. That was I totally agree. Yes, completely helpful. And this is such a special community we've got here. So yeah, tap into the resources, and thank you guys so much for sharing your time and your insight, and as well your contact information. Very, very kind and generous of you guys. So with that being said, if there aren't any other questions, I'll just say goodnight to everybody.
Thank you all. Take care. Have a good night.
Have a great night.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye-bye.